Happy Friday and welcome to BrainScratch. I'm your host, John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. Today's case we're looking into actually starts a bit like a searchlight case. It starts as a missing person, but there is an unfortunate development when the remains are found, and ultimately we have a family left holding the pieces and not really understanding what happened to their loved one, Dylan Bright. And it also seems like they're not getting a whole lot of help from the authorities. So can we raise some exposure here, maybe elicit some tips on this case? That's what I'm hopeful for. I hope that you will help me do that. Let's go ahead and get started reviewing this case. We're starting at missingpersonsofamerica.com. This is a website run by Jerry Dean. I've kind of bumped into her online in several cases. She usually does some very cool things for missing persons cases. She was reached out to from Dylan's grandmother. A grandmother has been searching for her grandson who is missing from Newton, New Jersey since June of 2015. This is the message I received from her. My name is Janelle Paul, and I'm trying to find some help to help find my grandson, Dylan Bright. He's 23. He's been missing since June 29th, 2015. I reported him missing to our local police, but I don't feel too helpful there. He's my first grandchild, and my bond to him is very strong. If there's anything you can do to help me, please let me know what you need. Thank you. And then, of course, we have an image of him down here. And this is not what I consider the popular image that is used of him. We'll see that as we get into the NamUs profile and the news stories quite a bit more. But this is, I like the quality of this image because it's just a simple selfie taken on just a regular day. It doesn't look like it's trying to elicit any particular emotional reaction out of you. I have a good feeling that this is a solid look at what Dylan looked like before he went missing. Here is the image that is kind of more widely circulated. I know that's a really tiny version of it. Let me see if I can kick that up for you guys a little bit here. Here we go. Oh, now it's too big. There. This is the one that's used in a lot of the news stories. I believe it's him just a few years younger. It seems to be a little bit before that picture that we saw over at Missing Persons of America. And of course, even though his remains have been found, I do think it's important that you understand what he looks like in case you might have seen something related to what happened to him. Maybe you don't know him, maybe you don't know his name, but certainly you might know his face. So that's why I just wanted to spend some extra time taking a look at this. Missing person, Dylan Payne Bright, male, white, Caucasian. Date of last contact here they have as June 24th, 2015. I also want to give a thank you to an anonymous brain scratcher. They wanted to remain anonymous, but they sent me a bunch of information on this case as well. It seems like there's a little bit of a debate about the date of last contact. It does certainly happen in June. Some communication I've seen suggests that he was at least texting with his mother on June 19th. And we kind of hear dates spreading all the way to June 28th, June 29th. I think the best date that we can go off of is what the grandmother is saying here, that he's been missing since June 29th. But sometime in that range, it seems like something happened to him. So if you live in the area, that's a particular range that we're looking to focus on in terms of knowing something. And the area that we're talking about is called Netcong, New Jersey. That's where ultimately where he would be found, as well as where he went missing from. He was 21 years of age when he went missing. 5'6" to 5'8", white Caucasian, 145 to 160 pounds. And what can we learn here about the circumstances? Dylan Bright was last seen by family members in Moore Township, Pennsylvania in June of 2015. Family believe he traveled to Netcong, New Jersey thereafter. He has not been in touch with family members since, and the failure to contact is not typical of his behavior. We're going to learn that Dylan certainly has had some challenges in his life, but despite all that, he seemed to remain in pretty close contact with family members. So as soon as they stopped hearing from him, they pretty quickly became concerned. Outside of that, I believe he's one of 6. He's got 5 siblings. So you got a lot of people that are wondering what happened to their brother. Of course, both of his parents. We've got grandparents, just a lot of people. Blue eyes, wore eyeglasses for piercings, was gauging his ears at one point. He has had snake bites in his bottom lip and his ears are pierced. Eyebrow is pierced at one point. It's weird. They put a question mark on snake bites. I think they're talking about the piercings. I've seen some piercings of his where there's basically a little piercing on each side. Perhaps that's what snake bites are. I'm not wholly familiar with it. For scars, he also had a scar across all 4 knuckles. I think that's about all the info we need to go on here. Well, if you did happen to see him at that time, he was last seen wearing a black shirt, light colored jeans with a black belt, of course, his eyeglasses, but he only wore them sometimes, so that is possibly on or off, and black sneakers. So what happened? We roll forward to April of 2016. Authorities investigating bones found near pond in Netcong. On Saturday, April 16th, Netcong police were notified about the discovery of bones. According to the prosecutor's office, during 5 days of investigation from April 16th through the 20th, law enforcement conducted searches of the area and found additional bones. The Morris County Medical Examiner and the Forensic Anthropology Unit of the New Jersey State Police are conducting further examination. And I've seen some footage of this area here. We get a bit of a picture. It's pretty much an industrial area that runs right up against, I guess, a pond. I wanted to say a creek, but it's known as Furnace Pond. Kind of an interesting area when you think about why is someone going to hang out there, especially on the kind of the back end of an industrial area. If there is some potential drug use, people are looking for a spot to go hang out and party, maybe something like that. But from what I understand, the terrain is not the easiest to get around. So I'm really not sure how he wound up there. And then, of course, the condition of his remains is also a very big question. However, we don't get any details on that until fast forward to February of 2017. Mystery solved. Remains found belong to Pennsylvania man missing for nearly 2 years. Authorities have confirmed the remains found near Furnace Pond this past April belonged to Dylan Bright. Over at WFMZ.com, we learned that someone that I respect a whole lot, Namus, might have had something to do with this. And actually someone else I respect a whole lot, Web Sleuths, might have been involved in this all coming together as well. At first, those conducting the recovery efforts wouldn't say if the bones were human, but the National Missing and Unidentified Persons Database reports those remains are Dylan Bright. So it appears Namus is the one that actually did the analysis to confirm that the unidentified body was missing person Dylan Bright. Bright moved to the Lehigh Valley after attending school in New Jersey, and according to the Morris County Prosecutor, a cause and manner of death have not been determined yet. And I wish that yet was a bit more appropriate in this case. But as we're going to find as we roll forward, the cause and manner of his death are not known to this day. Now, I did also mention that Web Sleuths might have played a role in this. He has a thread here, but it's literally only 2 pages long. However, it effectively shows communication that's happening between a few web sleuthers, and it looks like they did actually pull together this particular unidentified person's record, and then a web sleuther by the name of Kalara Owl helped to nudge Dylan's grandmother to get some DNA information in, and that seems to have helped cinch the case. So big shout out to Web Sleuths. You know, I talk about them frequently here on the channel. Of course, we've also supported them when they've done their fundraising and stuff. So it was very cool because I haven't seen a record before where the moderator says this, I'm marking this match. I didn't even know that they had like a category like that for when they crack a potential case like this. But they're making it clear that A. Pern spotted the match, and Kaylara Al was instrumental in getting his family in touch with authorities regarding this missing person and this identified person before he was even entered into NamUs. Congrats to both of you. And I do think that that is really awesome that people were able to help in that way. Of course, I mentioned cause of death not determined. Here we do have a little bit of a quote about it at the njherald.com. The cause and manner of Bright's death remain under investigation, said Agent Paul Merkler, adding, there is nothing further at this time when asked about a date and time of Bright's death. So this is where this case really gets tough, guys. First of all, we're talking about a missing persons case where we already don't have a lot of detail in terms of time frame leading up to his disappearance, who he was hanging out with, any of that kind of stuff. Now, one thing we do know is at one point when he was texting with his mother before he went missing, but it could be as much as a week before he actually went missing, he was talking about staying over at a friend's house. I would like to think that that investigation has been pursued, that someone has tried to figure out who that friend was and interviewed them, but I'm kind of seeing information that no one really knows who Dylan was hanging out with leading up to his disappearance. So I'm not 100% sure if that friend has ever actually been identified and questioned by police. But as we look into Dylan's backstory a little bit, we're going to see that outside of challenges he may have had battling alcohol and drug use, he ran into a little tough patch, particularly when he was 19, and maybe he could have been associating with some people that might have been dangerous for him to be associating with. It's kind of hard to tell because there's not a lot of information coming from authorities in terms of their investigation on this. But let's start with learning more about Dylan, unfortunately, through his obituary. Dylan grew up in Newton, where he lived before moving to Bath. He attended Newton High School, where he played football. Dylan also enjoyed writing poetry and drawing, as well as his free spirit walking trips. Now, that gets quoted a lot in subsequent articles about this case, and it does kind of raise a little flag with me as well because of the type of area that he's found in. Did he just decide that he wanted to go off on this walking trip and go walking towards that pond and then something happened to him there? Was it accidental? Did he bump into some people that he shouldn't have run into? Something along those lines? I don't know. But in terms of his personality, knowing that he was that type to kind of be a free spirit might help us understand a little bit more why we don't have a very solid timeline leading up to his disappearance, why it seems to have taken a number of days before his family might have actually noticed that he was missing as well. He was a shelf stalker at Giant Food Store in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, and I've already mentioned to you, but he does have 5 siblings and a whole bunch of other family members that are wondering what happened to him. Moving over to patch.com, we're going to learn a little bit more about Dylan's challenges, particularly when he was 19. A South Bethlehem couple who left their 10-month-old daughter in the care of a nephew and his friend returned home to find their infant home alone and that they had been cleaned out. William Torres Aprivado, 19 years old, was arrested on Monday and charged with theft, receiving stolen property, and endangering the welfare of children. The nephew, he was the friend. The nephew was actually Dylan Bright. And this article is saying that he remains at large and that both of these guys were basically listed as homeless at this time. From what I understand, I think Dylan was actually living with his grandmother. And let me just put out there that if any of the family members want to help clarify any of the details, if you guys want to come on and be interviewed on this channel to help raise exposure, whatever, please reach out to me. You can email me at John, John, at Lordenarts, just like it's spelled in the channel name down below, .com. John at Lordenarts.com, and we will definitely get your information and help publicize this further. Things that were taken were an HP laptop computer, a PlayStation 3, and about 13 games, a pair of Timberland boots, clothing, a wallet, and $1,500 in cash was also missing. The total value of the stolen items was estimated at $3,000. Now, I wasn't 100% sure if this was the same Dylan But when I looked at the area, this is really close to where he was living and hanging out. We've got the age of his friend being 19, and Dylan would have been 18 or 19 or at this time as well. I'm kind of suspecting that it is the same Dylan. On top of that, we get over to Facebook.com. And we have this posting from the Netcong Police Department. They say on March 28th, 2013, that William C. Apervato of Dingsman Ferry, Pennsylvania, and Dylan P. Bright, his middle name is Payne, of Newton, New Jersey, were arrested for a burglary to a residence on Allen Street in Netcong Borough. Now, I looked up Allen Street, and it actually is coming up as close to this area called Bethlehem. I have a feeling that both of these postings are talking about the same event. However, something is really wrong with the details here in terms of the dates. The dates are very close, but not an exact match. The first article says that this happened on April 1st, but this is saying that on March 28th, these guys were arrested. So one of these articles, either we're talking about two different events or one of these articles has that date wrong. But we have both the same suspects, and this is talking about a resident that contacted police to advise that his video games were removed from his room. Patrolman Pruden contacted a local video game store and was given the information by the clerk of Apervato and Bright. So it sounds like they took video games, went to a store, sold them or traded them in for some reason, and that's how they were tracked down. Another difference in these stories is here the police are saying that both of them are arrested. Over at patch.com, they're saying that Dylan actually remains at large. So maybe this is two different occurrences, but it is very strange. You're talking about William being arrested on March 28th. Was he only in jail for a day or two? Because according to this article on April 1st, he's back at it again, stealing something else. So I'm kind of confused at this point, guys. I really don't know if this is the same or different, but just a little insight. We know that Dylan went through a rough patch. This is a kid that had his challenges for sure. And here's the information on the probation. Newton man on probation for disturbance. He's on probation for 3 years after serving 160 days in the county jail for causing a disturbance at a local store. Now, this article is dated 2014, but guess what? This incident we're talking about, that same March through the March-April area where there's either one or two occurrences of him and his buddy stealing video games. Bright admitted that on March 2nd, 2013 in Sussex Borough, that while he was under the influence after drinking alcohol and Mucinex, he entered a store and began punching and kicking the walls, windows, and doors. He then ran into the street in front of a car and was eventually apprehended by police. This is the first time I've heard of anyone kind of partying on Mucinex. I've looked into it a little bit, and apparently it is a thing. Keep in mind, he's 18 to 19 at this point, and this certainly seems like a period of time that he was going through where he was really acting out. Did he get all that under control? I haven't found any records of anything happening outside of that. And keep in mind that, he's on probation at this point, and he's on probation for 3 years. I mean, basically, if he does anything else, gets, into anything else, he's going back into jail. So it's very possible that he was able to kind of pull himself out of that nosedive, maybe stop associating with some people that were doing bad things with him and, try to change his life. But unfortunately, we know that trail would soon run dry as well. Over at dailyrecord.com, son's bones found in Netcong. Mom wants answers. This is posted February 7th of 2017. A grieving mother is questioning authorities about her son's death after most of his bones, minus his skull and hands, were found in Netcong. His mother's name is Heidi, I believe it's Struess. So this really concerns me at this point. We're already talking about an area where maybe he walked out there on his own. It would be kind of weird, I think, to go walking behind an industrial area if you are on a free-spirited walk, but maybe. But it also could be that something bad is going on behind that industrial area, that he went there to possibly meet up with someone. Maybe he wanted to purchase something. Maybe he was selling something. I don't know. It just occurs to me that behind a building like that, some people might think of that as a semi-private place, or at least a place where you probably wouldn't get noticed by authorities. But then on top of that, we have that when his skeleton is found, his skull and his hands are missing. Now we're going to get into some more detail about the condition of that, and is it really as focused as it seems? Because when I heard this aspect of the story, I was like, all right, this seems like a body dump situation. It sounds like they tried to remove the pieces that would be easy to identify, get rid of the dental records, get rid of his hands so no fingerprinting could be done. We've seen other cases where people have done that intentionally to try to slow down investigations. Is that what we have going on here? I'm not 100% sure when we get into more details, but let's keep going. They are classifying this as an accident because there's just still parts of him that have not been recovered, said his mother. We last heard from him June 24th, 2015, so in my opinion, something happened to him on June 24th. The statement where she's saying that they're classifying this as an accident, I believe that was the prosecutor's office that actually said that to her, which is kind of a terrible thing to do to the family of a person that has died in any strange way, especially if you can't give them an exact answer of, hey, we know what happened. I have seen no information about, is there an autopsy report available? Has the family reviewed that? It's kind of tough because it'd be different if it was the investigator working for the local authorities that had said to her, hey, we think that this is an accident, and basically we're leaving this case open because there's still parts of him to be found, but we're not going to do anything else outside of that. But this is coming from the prosecutor's office, so it's a little bit removed from the original source. I have to wonder if the local authorities would really leave a case like this in this state. We know that it's very easy on autopsy reports for them to flag it as not determined. You basically can't determine how the person died. So if it was a not determined classification, that wouldn't necessarily be an accident. Basically, at least for the autopsy reports that I've seen, you have like homicide as a choice. You have accidental as its own separate category. It's not that if it's not determined that all of a sudden people say, well, maybe it was an accident. There's actually a classification for that, at least on the autopsy reports I've seen. And I know that they can vary from state to state. So maybe in this state things are different. But this is just a very hard turn to put towards the family of telling them that, hey, we think that this is an accident. It might be. It certainly might be. And the continuing conversation around this, the mother seems to allude to the fact that she might have been told that he could have overdosed. Maybe he was using some kind of drug, decided to go out on one of his walks, overdosed, fell where he was, and died, and that's that. But from what I understand with the way that his remains were found, I don't think that they were able to get toxicology results. That's just my opinion. I can't find any facts on that because there is no information that has been released that I can find, at least, that's actually showing his autopsy results, or at least even having people just comment on his autopsy results, which is very, very strange. There was two big aspects of this case from media's perspective. You have Dylan, a guy that goes missing, which is its own type of story. But then you have these bones that are found in an area, and there's several articles that are just tracing that. It's been a couple months now, haven't heard about those bones. So it's weird that you have this level of interest and attention coming towards this topic, this one and the same topic being about Dylan, but no details to put either of those stories really at rest. All we know is that part of his skeleton was found. We're missing his hands, we're missing his feet, we're missing some other things as well. But nothing for cause of death, nothing to help us understand what happened to this person, how he got there. Quite honestly, we don't even know how the bones were found. And when I look into cases like this, it's very typical that we at least understand what type of person found the bones. It was a hiker, it was a dog walker, it was someone hunting mushrooms. We don't even have that level of detail going on in this story, and it's really weird. I can tell you there is media around this story, but it just seems to be missing that deep dive, that local reporter that could have scratched beneath the surface a little bit and helped find the truth and report that out to the rest of us. Quite honestly, all the links that I have in the description box below, I think that's all the links for publicly available information on the internet related to this case. There's just not a whole lot out there. And of course, when you're looking into a big mystery box like that, it gets very tough when you hear from people that, yeah, you know, we're just going to call this an accident. Because there's so little to go on, I don't know how you come to that conclusion. So I definitely understand the family's frustration here. Struess and other family members traveled last week from their home in Florida to view those partial skeletal remains, which were missing the skull, hands, portion of a wrist, and the rib cage, and possibly the feet, Struess said. Now, another interesting fact that we could have here that we don't have is, in particular, when you're talking about portions of a wrist being missing, or even just the hand being missing, if those were removed by someone actually cutting, quite frequently there would be marks left on the bones that were left behind, or the way that the bone was broken would show that there was an item that was used to do that. We're not getting that level of detail here. I don't know if the family has asked about that type of analysis. I don't know if any of that analysis has been conducted at all. It is just one of the many questions that I have when I'm looking into this case, trying to make sense out of it, because and it's interesting that we hear possibly the feet. Same thing. If they were removed by someone to try to remove the identification of the person, they probably used a tool of some type. Did that tool leave marks behind in the bone that was left behind? On Tuesday, spokesperson Paul Merkler confirmed on behalf of the prosecutor's office that the bones had been identified as Bright. Struess said authorities told her that although the investigation would remain open, they were classifying his death as accidental. Now, we're going to go over another article. I don't think I highlighted that line, but in that article, she's very clear that it's the prosecutor's office that told her that. Here, she's saying the authorities. It's quite possible that she's been told this from multiple people. Let me just put that out there. It might not just be the prosecutor's office, but I'd be very curious to hear from her. Did she hear this from the investigators that were actually working the case? Merkler, in his statement on Tuesday, said the cause and manner of Bright's death are pending further investigation. I can't accept this as an accident, Struess said. Authorities did confirm that it will always be an open investigation until all of him is found, but I do not believe they will be going out to actively search for the rest of him. And I find that bothersome, because if it was their loved one, don't you think they would be looking? Yes, I certainly agree with her there. So it is rather heartbreaking just waiting to see if he happens to pop up. But it's interesting that we're having a statement from Merkler here saying that the cause and manner of his death are pending further investigation. That statement, for me, does not coincide with them determining that this was an accidental death. And that statement alludes to the fact that there is some other work that is going on with them trying to understand what happened specifically to end Dylan's life. I don't know if they're talking investigation like, hey, we're going to try to figure out who he was with and reach out to his friends and interview people. I don't know if they're talking about scientific tests that could be done on the remains further to give them a better understanding. Quite honestly, if I was in his mom's shoes, I'd really be pressing on that statement and saying, what does this mean? Where is this further investigation? What does that entail? What can we do to help you guys with that? I mean, what can we expect out of this? Is there a time when we can expect that that part of the investigation is going to end? I would have a lot of questions about that particular statement. Struess said that at her request, she was taken to the site where the bones were found, where she described them as being scattered in a small area of rocky ground within a foot or two of each other, near what she described as an industrial area near the pond. Of course, one aspect that we have to talk about here is the possibility that animals may have scattered the remains. And the way that she's describing this, it certainly seems like that is possible. Does that explain what happened to his hands and head? I don't know. I mean, I think we're starting to talk about statistical probabilities on stuff like that. For both hands to be missing and the head to be, I haven't bumped into enough cases with remains found in this state to really know that for sure. I know that when we've talked about the floating foot mystery, that we've talked about disarticulation that happens naturally during the decomposition process, which might account for things like the ankles and wrists kind of giving way and the hands and feet effectively being quite easy to remove. Of course, the neck is obviously another point of articulation where with enough degradation, potentially that could happen there as well. But it is a tough question when you're like, okay, well, if animals are kind of at his remains, then why is the considerable mass of his body still all in the same location? Or maybe it does explain, maybe it's the animal and the size of the items that it's able to take away. I don't know. There's a lot to be thought about in that realm and discussed more. Unfortunately, I'm just not the expert to do that. Struce acknowledged her son had struggled with a drug problem over the years, which previously had resulted in arrests. And obviously with the types of theft that we saw occurring, that might have been to help feed a drug habit as well, especially if you're trying to, steal a roommate's video games and, flip them into GameSpot to make whatever money you can off of them. But I do not think this was a drug overdose at all, Struce said. At one point, he was confined to house arrest with an ankle bracelet at his grandmother's home in Bath, Pennsylvania, but he still frequented the Morris County area. But he always contacted me, his mother said. Dylan always stayed in touch. He would say, "I'm okay, Mom. I'm doing good, Mom." And then it just stopped. Despite his troubles with drugs and the law, Bright remained close to his family, Struce said. The drugs did not define who he was, Struce said. He had an amazing sense of humor. He loved to make people laugh. He loved to annoy his siblings. These kids, they loved each other so much, it breaks my heart. This is just a huge loss for us. And I can certainly understand that. This last article I found on an RSS feed of all places, and it's from, it looks like njadvancemedia.com, written by Justin Zaremba. Pure hell, Struce said, just not knowing what happened. Struce and Bright's 5 siblings tried contacting him, but as holidays passed without word, they grew more worried. Struce herself constantly checked on her son's Facebook for any change. I was suspecting something that happened to him, but I never gave up hope because without proof, there's still a possibility he could show up, she said. She's also skeptical of some of the investigation's findings. Bright's head, hands, and part of his torso were not recovered, she said, pointing out that dental records and fingerprints are the standard means of identifying remains. We now know that it was DNA analysis. Seems like it was done by NamUs that was the primary identifier there. Struce also said her son was last seen running toward Furnace Pond on June 24th, an area he was known to frequent with friends. I'd be really curious to know more about this. Who's the person that saw him running in that area? Who else was with them? What was going on? Why was he running? I have a lot of questions about this sighting. I'd be really open to hearing more of that if any of the family out there wants to share that with me. Struce also said when she spoke to one investigator in early January asking for an update whether the bones belonged to her son, she was told, "This isn't CSI. It doesn't happen in an hour." That's an unfortunate quote that, quite honestly, I hear law enforcement say a lot, and in that particular instance, might have been a little insensitive. I don't know. The next day, 2 officers with her local police department came to her door and told her New Jersey authorities had identified the bones as Bright's. I get it doesn't happen in an hour, she said. I get that they're overwhelmed, but you know what? This is my son. I just want to know what happened. And she's really showing kind of an important thing here, something that I really try to push with families of missing persons. You have to be a squeaky wheel to get attention. And I believe that's why this notification came to her. Do you guys think it's a coincidence that, she's calling and she's asking about what are the status of those remains, and then literally the next day officers come to her door to tell her that it's her son? I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that is part of being the squeaky wheel and trying to make sure that you're getting the proper attention that your case needs. Struess also said authorities had her son's DNA on file from a previous arrest, but it wasn't properly put into the system. Instead, she and her daughter ended up driving across Florida in December in order to provide New Jersey investigators with samples of their DNA for comparison. Struess did, however, praise officers with the Netcong Police Department who took her to Furnace Pond on Monday to show her where her son's remains were found. My interpretation is he decomposed and started flowing down across multiple locations in Furnace Pond, she said. Nobody knows how he got in the water. Why aren't we trying to find out how he got in the water? And that's another interesting aspect of this. We heard that most of the remains are found in a rock bed, but we do know it is by a water source. Is this a pond or is this more of a creek that has a flow? Because typically around here, ponds are pretty stagnant water and there's no force to necessarily take remains. I mean, yeah, you might have something that falls into the water, but it's not going to go very far. So I'm not sure about this particular area. I don't know if this pond is fed by a moving water source. That could have taken his remains, some place further down that water source. But it is interesting to me that this is her interpretation, is that she's basically not saying that she thinks that someone took his hands and his head to hide his identification. It seems like, at least from this quote in particular, that she thinks that those pieces missing are part of the natural decomposition that was going on here because his body was so close to the water. And once again, she does raise a very good question. If he was in the water, how did he get in the water? What was going on that day? Who else was around? Was he there on his own? I don't know. So many questions on this case. Like I mentioned, down below in the description box, you're going to find just about every link that I think you can on this case. I even have a section of links that I didn't use in this coverage because they're primarily echoing the same information. But for those of you brain scratchers that really want to dig in, they're all down there. I ask you to please do so. Perhaps you will see something that I did not see. If you do, please share it with the rest of us in the comments below. As always, I ask we try to speak to each other respectfully and about this topic respectfully in the comments. I think there's a very strong chance that the family is going to see this video. And once again, my offer is out to that family, and know that my heart is out to you guys as well. I'm really sorry that you're facing this. And know that there are a lot of people here that care about this case, that want to understand it better, and want to help you guys get to the truth. And I really hope that the investigators working this case, maybe they'll bump into this video as well. Please answer these questions for this family so that they can really put all this at rest. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, everyone. I really appreciate it. I hope each and every one of you out there will have a wonderful weekend. Please come back to the Lord and Arts channel on Monday. I will see you there.